Sweezy. And if you guys are watching now, watching later on Twitch, YouTube, whatever it may be, you guys may recognize the beard sitting next to me here virtually, of course. That is Taylor Rockwell from the Total Soccer Show. Taylor, how are you, man? Thank you for coming on.
I'm doing well, other than like my mic etiquette is terrible as I like shake a pen right into the microphone. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to also give the listeners a little bit of insight. Congratulations on newly becoming a father. I guess how has podcasting from home and parenting from home all kind of combining been?
Yeah, it's been something. I mean, COVID was weird just to keep doing the show, but doing it from home. So like it's still talking to people for an hour or 2 hours every day. Today I talked to Joe for 2 hours and Ryan and Graham for 2 hours. So it's like, yeah, I like it feels like I've still seen people like for 4 hours at a time, but in reality I haven't. And then adding in a baby to that, it does feel a little bit like there's no real stoppage of time. It all just keeps going. There was in the first week I came back, I'm not complaining because my wife has had it way worse than I am. I guess I'm complaining a little bit, but she can complain more. I was definitely where I was going on like 3 to 4 hours of sleep, which does not make for great like connectivity of thoughts, and stringing together ideas was a little bit hard. So I think Joe and Ryan had to deal with me saying some things that I could always tell with Ryan when I've said something that doesn't quite land, when at the end of it he's like, all right, and moving on. And it's like, that was a bit rambly, and maybe this one is too. Who knows?
No, I mean, honestly, I'm sure I have no experience in that. There is a new nephew in the family, so I have a little bit of experience of watching a baby. But I mean, first nephew in the family. I was the baby in the family up until him. So I mean, it's a good 25-year gap at this point. So, I'm getting used to it for sure a little bit, and I couldn't imagine, what you're going through running this whole thing, and then on top of that, baby.
It's cool though, because it definitely does. Like my brother had kids before we did. My wife's brothers both did. So I've been like an uncle several times at this point now, and it's like it definitely is still like an amazing thing, and you get to hang out with them and you're like involved in their lives, and I really, really love it. But it's not a like de-stressor. And I will be honest, like having a baby definitely is, because like if you think something's wrong and something isn't, nothing will ever give you like better relief than that. And simultaneously, like I've definitely had some times lately of like, is this ever gonna end? I'm so stressed out. And then she smiles and I'm like, all right, we're good, we're fine, it's not a big deal. So it's definitely like I think she knows when she has to be adorable to de-escalate situations, and she does it really well. So she's pretty intuitive so far. Yeah.
Well, I love that. And at the same exact time, like we said, you've been successfully running a podcast, a string of podcasts now with underneath Total Soccer Show, right? How has the transition been? You guys are over a decade of, having the Total Soccer Show as being a thing, right? And now you guys have allocation disorder, you have the MLSAces, you have all this stuff falling underneath the show, and that that have come and go in the years as well. Also, being under an overarching The Athletic now as well. How has this transition been to modern day, 2021, where we're sitting now?
I mean, and I appreciate your being delicate, but like Darryl has to be like part of that conversation. And it's been strange. It's been pretty weird. I talked to George about that like maybe a month after Darryl passed, and it's still pretty. It's like a regular challenge of how to do things and how to make sure things kind of operate on the same level and in the same capacity. To take it all the way back, we started doing the show on public radio in 2009, the public radio here in Richmond, and then we turned it into a podcast so we could go long, because that is our style. And I think the shows on the radio were limited to like 27 minutes or thereabouts. So we kept doing that. We did it through 2014. And then, we started getting sponsors and supporters, which was amazing. And then I think basically what it was is that we would always get that question of like, what happens next? What are y'all going to do? Like, what's the long-term plan? And like sort of our long-term plan was like, keep doing this show. But Bobby Warshaw was the one who pressed us on that. And both of us were just like, I don't know, 2 more shows, I guess. And so that was kind of, I guess, the starting point of like, all right, well, let's do some more shows. And I think what happened, Darryl and I were both heading into the office at the same time when Joe Lowry tweeted like, I might start a podcast. And I think we were both like, arrived at the office with Joe wants to do a podcast, we should reach out to Joe, because he's very, very good at what he does. And then if you meet Joe, if you interact with him, he makes me feel like a complete slob in the way I talk. By everything is very specific, and there are no ums and ahs, and he doesn't get caught up in his words, and he is very deliberate. And I don't know how he does that, but he does it really well.
That's a really good Joe impersonation. I think.
He's more wholesome than I am. I don't know how to do the wholesomeness in the voice. Somehow he sounds like an adult and I sound like I'm his age, but there you go. And then, I think allocation disorder was when we became affiliated with The Athletic, and there were sort of plans there for them to do some different types of podcasts. And I guess we had some production expertise, so we were happy to help out with that. And that's kind of what it's been, because the podcast industry is still so new, and it's still a thing that, like, I think some people think is really easy to make money off of, and some people just want to do because it can be fun and is an enjoyable time, and trying to help people like get it going, because it's been really good for us. It's definitely a thing that we always kind of prioritized, and helping people however we could. I think also the more people know what podcasts are, the more like respectable of a job it is. So when I'm, at family events and they're like, "You do what now? You talk about," okay, sure, whatever. That's the end all be all, is just having my family members know what I do for a living. That
is a fair target and goal. Go up to Thanksgiving dinner and be like, you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, and not to like, I mean, to take it back to it, like, so when Darryl did pass, it was his mom came over, and it was sort of nice to see her experience it, because I think he didn't really talk about it. And I think his dad sort of like knew he talked about soccer, but that was it, same sort of thing. And so for her to come over and I think experience how much he meant to people here in Richmond, but then people wrote letters. They got, I think, hundreds of letters, like handwritten letters about what he had meant to them. And it was the recurring narrative was, I think, like, I've never met Darryl, but he feels like a very close friend. And that is, I think, like the highest praise you could give him, because I think that's what he wanted the show to always be, was reflective of, we want to be, nice people who you would want to have a conversation with, and not screaming into a mic about, I don't know, hot takes and whatnot. And so to bring it back to your question, that's been the biggest thing for me, I think, since he passed, was making sure that things continue to reflect the ideal that we had come up with together. And Darryl's definitely a bit more thorough and a bit less emotional. He ran a little bit less hot. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. So like for an example, like somebody messaged us a long time ago about like, "Oh, this thing hasn't happened with US soccer. Isn't that ridiculous?" And I was all ready to be, up in arms. And he was like, "Well, have you read about it?" And it turned out that like it hadn't happened because they'd launched a different program and put more money into that program. It was just a different name. And so I think that was like, Darryl had that kind of like, let's make sure we know what we're doing. Let's research. Let's just not spout off the top of our heads. And that's been a big one that I've kind of tried to internalize since then. And I think that will be the kind of guiding idea behind the show to the extent it can be.
And to kind of reiterate a point that you said in there, and something that, myself and I know my fellow co-hosts that I run the show with, listening to you and Darryl for years, you guys, became legit, like you said, like a family. Like it's odd talking to you now, because I've had your voice in my headphones every single day for the past, years and years now. So it's like, it's weird, because it's like, I listen to you and Darryl say something, and it's like, okay, like I'm listening to it. I have my own takes, I have my own opinions, but now it's like I'm talking to you. So whatever.
Well, actually, that's sorry, I'm cutting you off. We'll come back to it.
No, go for it. Well,
so I tweeted this like last week or 2 weeks ago. Again, time meaningless, but I am still really like fascinated by that. Like only a couple weeks ago did it click for me that people do that, because I do that with other podcasts I listen to, where I'm like, no, it's this movie. What are you talking about? Like you're getting it wrong. Like, and in that moment, it was like, oh God, people do that to me. So do you do that? Is that a thing that you've done to our show? I'm like, what do you guys? No, that's totally wrong. Oh no, is there a thing that we consistently annoyed you with?
No, it's not annoying. It's just like, how, like, again, you hang out around friends and family, quirks of friends and family that they may not recognize when they speak, or like certain things they start to like tend to like lean towards, right? Like if it's like something that's blue and yellow, they always lean towards blue and don't even recognize it. Like, it's just funny, like listening to it every day after day, week after week, month after month. And it's like, it's like, again, just becoming a family member or a friend. It's like, come on, Taylor, what are you talking about again? Like, it's that whole thing. And I'm sure I do it too.
But what is there a thing that you can think of either with me or Darryl where like, oh, like that is a little bit like you've already kind of established this feeling? I genuinely am curious, because I think if you asked me and I were being honest, I would say like the reason why I always say I'm a Man United fan is because I feel like I have to own that to then talk about them. Because if people are new, they might think like, who's this guy? He definitely seems to have bias here. So anytime I can like acknowledge the bias, I will try to do that. But I know there's probably times that I don't and don't realize I have it.
I think that's completely fair. Right. I don't on the spot right now, no, because I wasn't expecting to talk about this, but that's on fair. The spot, no. No, I don't have the feedback on the spot, but I mean, it's just
I am okay with you not having criticism. We're good. That's fine.
No criticism. I love it. It's something that I think is missing when you look at like, and it's not any type of like hate on like ESPN, Fox Sports, any of that stuff. Those people have great jobs and they do it phenomenally, but it's something that all those companies miss is like the human effect, the human element. Like, let's connect as humans. These athletes they talk to on a weekly, daily basis are humans, podcasters, everyone doing it is a human. So everyone has their biases, everyone has their negatives, all that stuff. Like, let's just acknowledge it. Like, everyone, like, as long as you're a good person at the end of the day, like, let's just kind of roll with it and like laugh at the negatives. I don't know.
No, that's I think that's the best. Like, and again, that's definitely Darryl's influence. I think he's a bit more just like let's do good so everybody feels good than I am. I think I'm definitely a bit more like cynical in that regard. A thing that I've tried to change because cynicism isn't good for a baby child. But I'm with you that it's so easy to talk about players in the abstract. And like one of the crystallizing moments for me was like doing a Top Drawer Soccer show with Travis. And I was talking about like a 17-year-old. I'm like, I just, that left foot is just not good enough. And it's like, man, if I were 17 and I heard somebody I had no idea who they were, but they were just talking about why I'm not good enough, like that would be a big bummer. And it is part of the job. It's part of the industry, but there are ways to do it. I think to your point that aren't just like, this guy sucks, but being like, well, I think he could develop there if he wants to kind of move to that next level. And I think that's a kinder, gentler way to phrase it, but I would prefer to be kinder and gentler than, I don't know, calling people names and then meeting those people for the first time and it being awkward.
No, 100%. Like I, a few weeks ago, I guess, might be 2 months ago at this point again, with your point time, not existent. I interviewed a U.S. men's national team player. I'll keep it super generic just because I don't want to like blow his thing up, but talking about it, potential move to Europe, eventually the move to Europe happened, right? Super nice dude, talked about, he was more focused on the mental side of the game during the conversation. I like that. I liked hearing about his mentality. If you want to take a guess, you can take a guess. I mean, I'll acknowledge it or not acknowledge it.
How long ago was this?
About, again, maybe time not great, 2-3 months ago.
And had he already moved?
Not at the point when I spoke with him.
All right. We can leave it there.
Okay. But I DM with him on Instagram on a regular basis. Very nice guy. Like, he wants to keep up with me. He asks me how I'm doing. Like, he remembers things. And I'm like, shit, you're a human being. Forget about that point, right? Like, that like him and I had a great conversation on podcast that led to a good conversation off the camera. And it's like, we just talk regularly, ask him how things are doing. And he said that the move to Europe, especially at a young age, was one that I think right away he wasn't ready for, especially in the middle of COVID. And his conversations have led me of kind of like being more focused on like the player's mentality and where they're at mentally and kind of how that can impact their game. All the talent in the world, but the mentality is different. And, I don't know how we got on this conversation. Wasn't expecting to get here in this conversation, but I love it.
Humans, man. Yeah. Cause like, no, I think about that a lot. Like that's the type of question I would like to ask. Like the one that sticks with me is I had to like cancel recording once because like my dog got sick. Had to take the dog to like the emergency vet. And there's like a player has had to do that for sure. But a player can't just be like not showing up to the game today. So I'm sure there's a time when like a player had to put their dog down and then play that weekend. And maybe they just weren't quite as like electric and alive as they would be otherwise, but they're not going to talk about that. They're not going to be like vulnerable enough in front of a camera, because why would you be to say like, oh yeah, my dog died, I was pretty sad, because they're going to get torn apart on any number of talking head shows. And so they're going to keep that to themselves. But to your point, like that stuff happens and it's just so easy to forget. Angel Di Maria, like subbing out of a game because his house was broken into, like that's going to have an effect. That's going to have a huge impact. And I think it's just really easy to be like, they're millionaires, they're fine. And it's like, they're millionaires with kids at home. I'm sure that wasn't fun to think about. So I'm with you. I think that's a really good way to kind of go about thinking about things. And also you're like, buddies with a player now. That's kind of cool.
I mean, that was honestly one of the best takeaways from that is like, yeah, like, I'm waiting for the full number so we could text, but it's cool now. But no. So kind of taking that mentality again, that's kind of how I always like to try to talk about players now. Yeah. There's points where it's like there's a striker who hasn't scored in 5 games, and I'm like, oh, my God, this guy sucks. But no, of course, I try to balance myself out. The Olympic qualifying, U.S. We've played a game against Costa Rica and now Dominican Republic. 2 very different looking teams, in my opinion, and this is my best attempt at a transition into this. The Costa Rica game, Costa Rica, in my opinion, I thought they were a much better showing than I expected. I know that they have a lot of super talented youngsters, but don't want to get super heavy into the Costa Rica side of things. But the mentality for that game was almost like bend, don't break, right? So I guess we can start there. What did you kind of see from the U.S. in that first Costa Rica Olympic qualifier?
I think in both games, genuinely in the first half, especially against Dominican Republic, and then against the entirety of Costa Rica, I saw nerves, and I saw the reason why Olympic qualifying and qualifying for youth tournaments is important, because these guys are aware that something is on the line, and if they don't make it, they're not going to go. This is the first men's qualification we've had since Cuba, correct? Since we failed to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. So to me, there's an awareness that like other guys have failed, we can't afford to fail, and I think you can see a little bit of that hesitancy, a little bit of that nervousness in the way they approached certainly the first half against the Dominican Republic, but I would say also aspects of Costa Rica as well. I think there are obvious lineup questions that have been asked by people smarter than myself. And I think those are fair questions to ask about the creativity in the team and how you kind of solve some problems against more challenging or more defensive teams. And I think we're still going to find out how we deal with that against Mexico on Thursday night and then to the knockout rounds. But I think overall, it's a team that has seemed a little bit nervous, but also very capable. And I think that's impressive given everything we've talked about, from COVID to roster changes to not having some of the players that could be there. I think overall it's been an impressive start, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. And I think especially the Costa Rica game, it was a lot of nerves, a lot of lack of match fitness as well. Plus on top of that, I think the players on the field, those question marks around crisis decisions were a little. I was on that board of like, where's the creativity? Georgi Mihailovic was the only really creative factor to me that kind of had that ability, right? But at the end of the day, Jesus Ferrara continued to score. But then against going into the Dominican Republic, Ferrara did not look good. Sub on Soto, and Mihailovic late, Dotson late, like. It's a lot of, I guess what I get worried as a U.S. men's national team fan when I'm watching the full team or I'm watching this team, it's like, do we rely upon like these special moments so much, or is it like there's actually like a style behind the play, right? Like we struggled against the Dominican Republic, who we should be pretty much beating up on whenever we play them at the U23 level, the senior men's team level, whatever it may be. Like, did we have to rely upon Hassani Dotson just as an immediate spark plug, Jermaine Jones-esque, right, to come on and be that, I guess, changing force? I don't know. Like, did you see anything that you felt was like tactically? And this is something that I praise from you, is like the tactical mindset I don't have, and I try to do my best to have it, but I don't. Did you see anything tactically in the first half that against the Dominican Republic that they were trying to do that maybe Dotson coming on or Mihailovic coming on, like, just was able to kind of offer a little bit more?
Yeah. So Joe and I talked about this a little bit today, but I don't mind summarizing that and stealing some of his points. I think what we saw from the U.S. in the first half was like Jackson Ewell, if he was on the left side of that central midfield, when the U.S. was in possession, he would go very far wide, and that the left back would push further up the field. When it was on the right-hand side, Johnny Cardoso would do the same thing. And I think all of that was designed to break down a Dominican team that they thought was going to be in a 4-4-2. I think they thought it was going to be a very tight, very narrow 4-4-2. And so the objective, I think, was to have numbers wide, have the ball there, create overloads, and either get down that channel or pull players out and then open up space in the middle. Dominican Republic came out in a back 3/back 5. And I think that sort of completely nullified the overall game plan, because what they were doing was vacating space in the middle of the U.S. to have those numbers wide. But then all the Dominican Republic needed to do was put one player there, and you've kind of blocked that off. Yeah. And so that's why I think there kept being that slow cycle of possession without much creativity. And in the second half, they kept their midfield central. They kept those 3 central. They let the fullbacks just patrol up and down. And I think they were just much more aggressive and much more willing to take chances. Again, I think they didn't want to get caught in transition. They knew that was where they were most vulnerable and where the Dominican Republic would try to attack. But sometimes you can be a little bit too concerned about that counter. And I think that they changed it up, put numbers in better positions, and then backed the individuals. And that's positive and negative, to your point, that if you have a team where everybody kind of knows the system and is interchanging and moving and overlapping, you create opportunities. The system is the creator at that point. But when you rely on the individual, and I think that's a thing that's happened with Andy Herzog's teams in the past and with other youth teams with the US, you're sort of relying on pace and skill down the wings and less so sustained build up through the middle. And I think we saw some of that against Costa Rica. I think we saw some of that against the Dominican Republic, but we also saw like 20 pass sequences that led to goals. And that's not a thing I would have expected from the first half. So I think we saw them put players where they needed to be, play smart soccer, kind of believe in themselves to get something going. And when they did, to continue it. And here we are, a 4-0 win. I'll take that.
You know, exactly. 100. I'll take the end result at the end of the day, right? So, I mean, that I'm happy about. And the point of the wings is something that's very, very interesting to me, because like we're getting way more production out of the fullbacks than we are the wingers. None of the wingers have really kind of stood out to me as like, I definitely want to pencil them in at the left and right wings, right? Like they've all done fine. But Sam Vines, Julian Araujo, Aaron Herrera, they've just been way more impressive to me getting up and down the field, right? But then, you know, leaving the door open to a counterattack as well to that point. So yeah, I guess what I'm thinking is, you know, we already locked ourselves up for a semifinal spot, right? The most important game of this entire qualifying isn't against Mexico. And that's where I feel like there's a lot of conversation right now is the game against Mexico. How are you feeling about that? It's not a game that I guess it means something of if we're going to play Honduras or if we're going to play Canada, but is it something that we should be throwing Justin Glad out there, who's on a yellow, but he's been our best center back? Something that we should throw Jesus Ferreira out there, who's had, you know, a good performance, a poor performance. He's sitting on a yellow as well. Kind of how are you feeling about the Mexico game leading into the semifinal?
I don't think this is a cop-out answer, but my genuine answer is I feel like whatever Jason Kreis wants to do to best prepare the team for that knockout round game, that's what I want to happen. So if that is, we want Justin Glad there, we want Jackson Ewell and Perea there to sort of get more familiar with the system, get more familiar with what we're asking of them, great. If they're not there because he wants to rest them and make sure you don't have the yellow card accumulation threat, that is also fine with me. It's a very strange time to play Mexico in a tournament and sort of not care about the result, but it is the case that if we lose 5-0 to Mexico, but then win that semifinal and we go to the Olympics, like I don't care that we lost to Mexico. That's kind of all that matters. Yeah. And vice versa. If we win 5-0 but don't go, it's like a moral victory for sure, but they're potentially earning Olympic gold again, and we are potentially sitting at home again. So whatever allows the U.S. to play the best soccer they can in the knockout rounds, that's what I am there for. And also, like, some of the things I thought wouldn't work have worked. I really didn't think Sebastian Soto coming in for Jesus Ferreira at halftime was a good idea. And I think the way Soto dropped in and linked up play and worked really hard off the ball in a way that I think he didn't against Costa Rica or wasn't able to. Like, he looked really good to me, so I won't mind if he starts and Ferreira gets a break. I wouldn't mind if Ferreira plays somebody somewhere else just to see what he can do. So I think I'm okay with experimentation from the U.S. and resting some people. I wouldn't mind seeing David Ochoa come back in and get minutes against a team that are probably going to get some shots off. If they go with Marszałkowski for the same reason, yeah, that's fine too. I do have questions about Mexico because they've played, I think, 10 of 11 of the same players from one game to the next. So also, will they rotate? And if they do, are they considerably weaker or are they still pretty good? Because my guess is that they're still pretty good, even if it's their B team from this B team.
I think they're still pretty good. I mean, this is a very good young group from Mexico, and which sucks because, right? Like, we don't like Mexico, but it's at the end of the day, I think it'll be a good game, kind of whoever goes out there. It's like you want to beat Mexico, but again, we don't want to sit home for the dance. It is what it is. Who has impressed you the most from this Olympic qualifying group? Me personally, Justin Glad is a guy who I've been hot and cold on his entire career. He's the most experienced veteran in this young group, right? He has over 100 and I think 20 games played for RSL at this point. I know one of my co-hosts, Sam, huge Justin Glad fan, right? He's like, Justin Glad, like, how is he only 20 whatever years old, 21 years old, right? I like performances, but then I think we just get such shaky performances from him on the national team level, and I've seen it at RSL as well. But he's been an absolute rock for us with a group where we only have 3 center backs, right? So Justin Glad is a guy who I'm loving watching these past 2 games. I guess who's really impressed you?
I've liked Justin Glad a lot. The times that I've seen him look very, very good in possession, both for various U.S. teams and then also at club level, like, I've been into it. I've been like, this guy's great. But then he does have those inconsistent moments. There was one, I forget who it was against last season, where it was just like he just completely gave the ball away. And it was like, that's not great.
That's not great.
I don't do that because, I mean, obviously that's not a thing you can afford to do as much at senior national team level. Glad aside, I thought David Ochoa, I will never know which one it is, really, really did an amazing job against Costa Rica, because in the same way that if Jesus Ferreira scores in those opening minutes, it's a completely different game. If the U.S. concedes off of I think it's one of the center backs getting robbed in possession. It happened a couple of different times in that one. But then, like, if they concede from that, suddenly I think there's even more doubt with those center backs. I think there's more hesitation to play on the ball. It's probably you end up just going long. And so I think some of those saves he made were just fundamental to the U.S. being able to play the game they wanted to and being calm. I think Sam Vines has been really, really important to that as well. That's a player who I was already like pretty hyped about, but then watching him for this team and how good he has been, continued to be on the attacking front, but still getting back, overloaded a little bit, I guess, against Costa Rica, but I wouldn't put that entirely on him because when you're trying to mark 2 people at once, that's always a bit of a challenge. So I thought he was really good. And then probably Hassani Dotson as well. That was one who Joe and I disagreed about on the Costa Rica game, that I thought he was good, but I thought his positioning was a little bit suspect at times. Joe had much more positive things to say. And then after his brace against the Dominican Republic, I'm definitely on Team Dotson on that one. Because both goals, it's really, really, really good first touches, but also both of them setting him up to hit the ball exactly how he needed to. The first one pops it up a little bit so he can take it on the volley. The second one, it's like opening up his hips so then he can go around the defender, but then get with the second touch, I think it was still a great shot into the side netting, and both of the finish is great as well. So not just because he scores goals, he's been very good for the U.S., especially against the Dominican Republic, but those are probably the 3 that have most stood out to me.
Okay. And I mean, like, I think that's completely fair, right? Like, I am maybe the conductor of the Sebastian Soto train. I love him, but I mean, clearly Dotson, Vines, Glad, Ochoa, like, those are the guys who have really, I guess, upped their potential for Greg Berhalter's squad as well, because this is also a big showing for that as well. And I think Berhalter's definitely paying attention, or he should be paying attention.
He should be. I'm guessing. I think, and in that regard, I think it's probably Sam Vines is the one who has the most to gain, because the left back spot just remains a question mark for the senior team. And there's like 3 possibilities, but there are reasons to not love those 3, including Serginho Dest over there, because would we rather have him on the right? Who knows? So I think Sam Vines, if he keeps playing really, really well, gives Greg Berhalter more reason to call him in. So I think Soto, like, not to say that he's been bad. I don't think he has been. I just think he's different than what Jesus Ferreira brings, obviously, and I really like Jesus Ferreira. But I was excited to see Soto included. I was excited to see him brought back to Norwich, and really the work effort from him in that second half last night, and just the on the ball and off the ball hustle, I thought also made a big difference. So I think your hype for Sebastian Soto is justified and fair.
I just love it. I love it. And it's a tough striker pool. So I'm going to not make you choose a striker. I think that's completely unfair. I think there's many a pick that you can have without this striker pool. But we've all seen the graphics on Twitter and on Instagram and all over talking about the MLS guys, the European guys, the guys making the move from MLS to Europe. if you had to, I guess, pinpoint a few strikers that you feel like you would like to have in a 23-man roster, let's say 2 or 3 guys, right? Who is leading the pack for you right now? Are you still a Josie's our best striker in the pool guy? Are you a Josh Sargent all the way? Like, I guess I want to hear more about your take on the striker pool.
Yeah. I don't know if I have like an out and out first choice for me, but I think the first name that I would probably put on there with confidence is Josh Sargent. I think that's definitely wasn't the case earlier in the season. Yeah. And I think some of that is the kind of situation that Josie Altidore had at Sunderland, where he's not getting great service. He's not being put in consistent attacking opportunities. So then he takes those chances more regularly and gets more confident and then scores goals. But he is scoring goals now. And I think also from what we've learned about Berhalter with his pursuit of Yunus Musah, with his pursuit of Serginho Dest, is that he is in touch with these guys and he is sending them clips, and there are conversations about what they need to do and how they could have done this and how that fits in with what the US is doing. And I have to believe that he's having those conversations with Josh Sargent. And my hope would be that when we see him in camp, when we see him, I would guess against Jamaica, he starts, to see if he does more of what Berhalter wants from that number 9, of sometimes dropping and sometimes stretching the line and sometimes overloading one side. If he has that mobility and is moving around as opposed to being a little bit more static, that's a thing I would very much like to see. If he's being static deliberately because he has people running off of him and people running around him, also fine with me. But I think to see how his game has progressed with the national team because of how it's progressed at club level, I think Josh Sargent is definitely on that list. I think I'm still on the like Josie Altidore is up there conversation, but I will admit that like it's been so long since we've seen him at this point, and there's always the injury concerns and how's he coming back and how's he going to start the season. So I think I would like to see Josie in there. I don't want, like, I feel bad that Clint Dempsey's last game for the national team was the failure to qualify. And I would like Josie Altidore to get another game and just sort of remind us that he is a good goal scorer. Even if he's not going to go to the World Cup, I still think maybe give him a couple more games just to, I don't know. It's unfair to me that he was one of the ones who was kind of blamed for it. Same as it was, in my opinion, unfair that it was Michael Bradley who got blamed for it. It seemed like they're the two, despite other people having already been brought back into this national team who played that night. It seems like those two get the most stick. And I would like to see Josie Altidore on that list. Aside from that, like, it is really wide open that there are lots of young players at various levels in various leagues scoring goals, doing things that seem reminiscent of what Berhalter wants them to do. So that's a tough one. Like, I think right now, I wouldn't have said this maybe even a month ago, but like Darryl DK is doing things, man. And it's not just scoring ridiculous goals. It's fighting for everything. He feels like a player that could be put in if the US are chasing and they need someone to fight for crosses, to fight for 50-50s and just be in there to be a presence. But his technique has improved and his touch has gotten better. And I remember watching him for UVA and it was not close to what it is now. And it's definitely improved from when he was with Orlando. So that's another one who I think he doesn't quite fit what Berhalter wants from that role, but I would still like to see him called in to see what he does do in that situation and how he progresses from there.
You mean you weren't watching DK at UVA saying this guy's playing for Barnsley in the next year and a half?
I mean, maybe, but that wasn't a positive. that was like, I have one friend here in Richmond who's from there, who is a Barnsley supporter, and it's just always like sad noises when I ask how things are with Barnsley. I was like, it's terrible. It's terrible. So that was kind of how I came to equate Barnsley with soccer. And then I think that's the one that Breck Shea flipped off as well. Yes. So between those two, like, if you told me that, I would probably, if anything, have been like, that's not good for him. Instead, they're chasing the promotion spots and he looks really, really good. Sure. Great. Well done, Darryl DK.
Oh, exactly. And where does Breck Shea fit? No, I'm just kidding. Good old Breck Shea. Love him.
Good old Breck Shea.
I'm of your take as well. Like, I want to see Josie score again in a meaningful game. I would love to see him get a World Cup goal. Just kind of give him that big miss he just hasn't had in his career, right? I got a lot of shit on Twitter, on the internet. So shockingly, I got shit on Twitter a few months ago about me saying that Josie Altidore is a guy I would love to see at the World Cup coming off the bench as like a super sub role, because I think you could get a solid 15, 20 minutes out of him at this point, obviously, right? World Cup's still another year away. We'll figure things out then. But people were saying, I'm MLS biased, that, Josie's done, all this stuff. I just feel like there's some needed...
No bias revealed there at all, by the way, from the people who were writing that criticism. Sure.
No, exactly,
Just
right?
you is
No, it
biased. Yep.
wasn't the flip side too. But do you take that, I guess this may be a larger question picture, but I'm a person who believes in having people who've been at the World Cup before
Uh-huh.
on the roster to kind of just say this is how things are done. If you exclude Josie Altidore, the only person in a potential 23 that I can think of is John Brooks. And obviously, John Brooks, veteran, a guy who's probably still our best defender. John Brooks is it if you
Yeah.
take out Josie Altidore. So I want Josie there just as a guy who's like, I've been here before. I've been in a World Cup. I've played with Dempsey and Donovan. Like I've been with these guys. I'm a legend of US soccer. Like follow me, follow John. Like let's go show you how to do this thing.
I mean, I feel like you're counting out DeMarcus Beasley, and he can never be counted out. Beasley aside, and I guess Aaron Johansson maybe could make a resurgence, but I don't think he played in 2014. I think he was there but didn't play. Maybe he got a minute or two. Oh yeah, let's get Mix in there. That's the difference maker. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. It's like, and to the point about Olympic qualifying, that I think they handled that well, admittedly against the Dominican Republic, against I don't know, Serbia. Like if Serbia are doing something different than you expected them to do, and that was routinely the case, say, with when Bob Bradley was in charge, it required changes at halftime and adjustments. And I think, yeah, to have a veteran who's been there and been like, it's fine, we can fight through this, we can find a way back. I think, like, to extend it further, that's why a part of why Bayern have the success they do is because everybody who plays for Bayern Munich has won the Bundesliga or won some silverware and maybe won the Champions League. And if you always, I mean, they have a term that means like Bayern luck because somehow they always find a way to win. Forget what the term is, and I wouldn't be able to say it anyway because I don't speak German. But like, yeah, there becomes an idea of like, nah, we're going to win. Don't worry about it. We'll find a way through. Like, of course we can do this. Whereas if you lose every game when you're up or you don't find a way to kind of get a result in the second half, then that becomes your norm. And so, yeah, I think having a player who's been there, who can pick people up, and even if they haven't, been there 4 times and scored a bunch of goals at the World Cup, like still just the presence of mind and the experience is, yeah, I think it's really, really valuable. I think to the people who say he's done, like, honestly, like maybe he is, but I haven't seen him in a while. And I would guess that the people who are saying he is done definitely haven't seen him in a while. And I think Toronto, in my mind, aren't really appointment viewing. I'm not trying to be disparaging, but there are other MLS teams who, when they're playing other MLS teams, I'm going to be like, I want to see that game. I want to tune in. I feel like a couple times last season, I went to watch Toronto and Josie was hurt. And that's like, if I'm tuning in to watch Josie play, it's like when I used to watch Frankfurt just to see Timmy Chandler play. And then if he gets hurt or he's not playing, I'm not going to watch Frankfurt anymore. And I bet there are a fair few people who haven't seen him play at club level, just remember Kuba, just remember how bad that was, and then kind of go with the stereotypes of like injury prone. Is he that good? Is his touch good? Does he finish enough? And it just sort of becomes, not to say that the people who are criticizing him are lazy, but I think there's some people certainly are. And I think it's easy to say, oh, he's past it, he sucks. Than to say like, well, here's why I think he might offer value, or here's the thing he does that other people can't do. And until other people can, he's the guy who's going to do it. I think it's hard sometimes to do that because it feels like I'm going to get a lot of stick for this one. And maybe Josie Altidore's past it. But I think, yeah, fundamentally, if you're just saying what is your honest truth, like that's all that matters, because you're not playing a role. You're not saying a thing to say a thing or having a take. You're just saying what your honest appraisal of the situation is.
Exactly. I mean, that was my whole point of like, no one's clear front running, like taking away the title of number 9 from Josie. So Josie has it until, I mean, my only other person that I've said could potentially have it is Giassi Zardes. Just mainly because Zardes just seems to score, whether if it's off his face, his foot, whatever it may be, the ball goes in the back of the net when he plays. That was my only other person I gave an argument for.
And he does what Greg Berhalter asks. Like, it's easy to not love Giassi Zardes. It's easy to not love Christian Roldan. I don't always love when he's in squads because I feel like there are other better players, but there's the balance of, do those other better players like have the familiarity with the system? Do they understand what Berhalter wants? Does he get along with them well? I think that's what Giassi Zardes is. He comes in and does exactly what Berhalter wants, even if it's not glamorous or pretty. I think if you're a coach, you can't ask for much more than that. Yeah, he's definitely still in that conversation too. That's a good shout.
Okay. Well, Taylor, I didn't expect this conversation to go as long as it did, but I'm very, very happy about it. It was very Total Soccer Show-esque, and I'm very happy about that.
Rambling it all over the place?
It's okay. It's what I wanted out of the conversation. No, it was absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna have to have you on again to talk more about the women's national team and stuff like that when we get a little bit later on down the line. I wanted to touch on that today, but we ran long. It's okay. We talked about the games that just happened, and I'm okay with that.
Macario is also good. That's on a
Yes.
collision course. We'll see how that goes. We can talk about that next time.
I like that. All right. Taylor, thank you for coming on, for joining me, for making your debut on the MLSAces podcast. I greatly, greatly appreciate it, and we'll have to have you back on soon.
That sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.